The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Benjamin Dixon Morning Show. I'm still not Ben. Anoa Changa filling in again today, and I'll be back tomorrow, I think. Lucky you. Anyway, really nice to be here and have this conversation with you today. I'm also joined by someone I really enjoy talking to and about all the things. And she's going to come talk to me today about some of, thoughts on like where we're at. Folks keep talking about democracy's on fire. We got to save democracy. You ought to be doing X, Y, and Z. And, this is one of the brightest people I know on the subject. So I am excited to have my sister friend, Amanda Hollowell, join this morning. I'm so tongue-tied because I'm so excited, but I really appreciate Amanda's candor. I really appreciate how Amanda is willing to shoot it straight and that she has a really good lay of the land, whether just here in Georgia. She's also a Georgia-based movement mama organizer extraordinaire. But she definitely has a good viewpoint on the national landscape, because there are a lot of folks who know either they know what they know in their local home communities, which is beautiful, brilliant. Definitely seek out the local knowledge because that is really super crucial. And Amanda definitely has that. People are often calling on Amanda like, hey, girl, stuff is going on in your area. Who should we be talking to? What candidate should we be endorsing? Whatever. But also on the flip side, Amanda is still looking at what is happening on the national landscape because contrary to popular belief, those two things do actually intersect in our lives. So Amanda, thank you so much for joining this morning. How are you?
Oh my goodness. That was, you give me too much credit, but thank you. And I would say it's like people like you in my circle who I get to learn from. Because you are a wealth of knowledge as well. So thank you for that intro. And I am good. Like, I think today is Friday. I made it.
It's actually Thursday, but I love the double Friday energy. It's also almost Gemini season. So we're all good. Like, I mean, I think that's what it is too. It's almost, Amanda's a fellow Gemini, and a mother of a young adult son. So we vibe on multiple levels. Actually, I do actually want to step back and just talk to you for a second about raising a young Black man, right? From teenager into young adulthood. And we're having this whole conversation right now about like when someone should be called adult, after the Buffalo shooting. I'm just like, when you see these types of the deference and the treatment that, violent whiteness gets, because we've had several instances of young white men, white teenage boys, young white men doing stuff like this that our boys would never, like for far less, they get credit for far less, right? They get support in far less severe or serious situations. And I just was wondering, your thoughts on like that imbalance in how they're treated when we have mass murderers versus like, possibly getting busted smoking weed. That's what happened to mine.
Right. I mean, I can give okay, so it's so layered, right? Like, and I think it's like recently it became popular to talk about that Black people have this certain conversation with their children about when they leave the home. And I was like, oh, we're raising awareness about something that's actually very private to our culture about how we move in this space, right? And so I can give a very personal experience, which was my son, who I love to death, but is a knucklehead at times, senior year, decided to take a paintball gun with his friends, and they were like paintballing each other's cars, and it was hilarious. One of the kids actually drove their mother's car. And so the mother found out, she was upset. And so the kid, instead of just being like, yo, let's figure this out privately, he told on all his friends. And at first I was really upset, and like my son got wrapped into it, and they were like, well, he had a paintball gun. And the school, like, mind you, my son is going to a 4-year college, scholarship and everything. And the school, I guess they call them resource officers, the really just cops, was like, ma'am, this is a felony. Your son could lose his life. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, this is your star athlete. He is a great student. He is going to a named 4-year college. And you're telling me because he brought a paintball gun and because his friend slipped on him, he's going to lose everything about his life? And so, you know, and it was a white officer, white principal. So I had to start advocating and like hollering at everybody I knew, because I knew the superintendent, I knew the chief of the resource officers, and I called them and they were like, we have no clue what you're talking about. And I was like, well, your resource officer is threatening kids and their future, and we're a month away from graduation. It was a senior prank. And so with that, they were like, you need to calm down. Like, he's not going to do that. We'll talk to the officer. Everything's fine. We'll talk to the parent. And I was like, fantastic, right? So we resolved that issue. It was just so overwhelming for me, because it was like immediately like the most extreme punishment for these young Black boys. But I know white kids would have gotten away with like a, haha, you guys are crazy. Does your parents have insurance? You know what I mean? And so.
Right. Like, you tripping when you have insurance. So like, it's okay. You have to be having insurance if you're like your teenage kid drive your car.
Right, exactly. And like all the young men that were involved in the incident were Black. And so like that even made it like more compounded, right? And so, you know, my son with all the boys were cool. Like someone paid the parent to like to get the paint off her tires. Like it wasn't a big deal. That taught my son a very valuable lesson, which is like, you got to trust your circle, right? Everybody ain't your friend. And then I went to work. Well, I didn't work. I met some students who were coming up to the Capitol. I was at the Capitol to talk to state representatives. And one of the students I was talking to, I was like, yeah, like, tell me your story. I'm super interested. They were all from Savannah, and we were in Atlanta. And he was like, yeah, I got a felony because I brought a paintball gun to school, and it broke me. So this young man is really trying to refigure out his life. He's learning how to be an advocate and everything. And here I am, just like a few weeks before that, advocating for my son, but no one advocated for this child, and he caught the rap. And that just right there is what drives me crazy about this current situation we're in when we talk about Black violence and when we talk about white boys versus young Black men. Like, y'all never given us a break. Like, these young men, these young boys, these teenagers, like whatever, like they never have a chance to get redeemed. And I think that's part of the conversation we're missing. And then on top of that, the like pass go to every like white kid that does violence is just overwhelming.
Right. You know, you and I would not be hands off if we drove our sons across state lines to go kill people. I mean, just plain and simple, right?
Okay. Okay.
Like, there would be no book deals. There would be no like news circuit. It'd be like, do not pass go. Go directly to jail. The boys would be under the jail. Like, it just wouldn't. I just figured, because I know we talk a lot about the boys. You know, my son is just a little bit younger than Amanda's, but similar shenanigans at various points in time. And the paintball gun is actually just such a really interesting thing, right? Because it is not uncommon for teens to have their own. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's super common, but it's also not uncommon. Paintball has gotten to be a really big deal. And it's not like, well, we live in Georgia since the Wild Wild West. It's not like it's illegal to have one necessarily either, right? So, you know, having recreation. I remember when the kids got their own paintball guns. It was because we were starting as a family. We were going out to paintball. At, you know, I was still with their dad. You know, my sisters, like all of us as a family. So them and their dad, I didn't want one, but they all had their own paintball guns, right? And I remember when Max wanted to run outside. He might have been in like 7th grade, I think, at the time. Wanted to run outside and show it to his friends, and I like immediately was like, do not take that outside this house. Do not take it until we go to the paintball range. But like, they're not thinking about that, right? Because even at 18, and he's now 18, even at 18, they're still just super playful, and they're not thinking that they're doing any harm, right? And so there is like a gap right? Because we also have, and this is not to say that a person who drives 3.5 hours, 2.5 hours, however far, arms up with body armor, whatever the case may be, that they are not, culpable or whatever. It's just the fact that that is someone who will be given consideration because of their age and allegedly because of their mental status and allegedly because of COVID and all these other factors that make them or that they're trying to make seem sympathetic. Whereas our children who are just doing things that silly boys do because boys do silly stuff, not trying to be sexist, y'all know it's true. There are like tons of, Dennis the Menace, come on now, like seriously. But there is so much of that. So I think it's actually important and relevant to this discussion about like, what are we doing right now and what's happening with democracy? Because the criminal justice system or injustice system or the criminal system, however we want to phrase it, does directly, and how people are treated does directly interface with, it parallels in many ways what we're seeing happening as a breakdown at multiple points of democracy. Now, not going to talk to you about your official work. Just trust me, y'all. She's an official person. She does super great official things. And I'll have an article quoting her in her super official capacity tomorrow. But I did want to talk to you just because you have this really, I think, great vantage point from a local and national perspective about like kind of where we are around like some of these attacks on democracy, and not just from the voting rights standpoint, right? When we're looking at, attempts to end abortion, just attacks on the election process, all these things are intertwined. I just wonder if we can just kind of like, from your perspective in both like that national and state level, like what do people need to really understand about like how these things are meshed together and kind of where we are in this moment?
That it's all important, you know what I mean? And so like, because I get to talk to so many different people, and so many different, I would say so many stages of their democracy advocacy, it is hard to thread the needle for them because there's so much energy. Like right now, trying to get a white woman to pivot to, instead of to talk about reproductive rights, but to talk about reproductive justice and centering Black and brown and indigenous women is very hard because she's very much in this like tunnel vision about her rights and like about what the story she's heard, though they're 9 times out of 10 privileged and they can always still get the resources. And so like having those conversations and then doing this overarching umbrella thing that I have to do, which is like connected to voting. Right. And so it's been interesting because a lot of them don't, a lot of the folks who read or heard about the brief about the release of the draft, think it was the Supreme Court's decision. What they don't know is that started at the state level and got kicked up to the Supreme Court. So your state legislators and your state judges are the ones who are really determining like what your access is to healthcare. And however it goes, whichever way it goes, it gets kicked up to a higher court for a higher decision. And so I'm trying to cultivate and direct energy. So now we have, I feel like there's a lot of like Black voters and Black volunteers that I talk to that they're not disenchanted, but they're worried and they don't feel heard. They don't feel like they have allies in this moment because one voice is way louder than their voice, but you want us to show up for you, but you have yet to acknowledge that 10 of us were murdered in a grocery store. And some of us, they were just like elderly people who've lived on this world for so many times, for so many years, and have so many beautiful stories and legacies behind them. And you can't take a moment to stop and just say, I heard your pain. And so, I feel like I'm doing the impossible of trying to bridge the gap and make everyone see each other's side. I know like a few years ago, like intersectionality was the buzzword and now it's DEI. But we have yet to connect those dots into action. And that's been probably one of my more frustrating moments. But also I feel like if I can get you talking, I can get you to move. And so that's kind of where I've been in this space.
So we have a primary coming up here in Georgia, and we got a lot at stake. Our own. I mean, just like Mississippi's, like you were saying, it was the Mississippi 15-week ban that got kicked all the way up to the Supreme Court. And Mississippi, once the Supreme Court shifted the way it did, Mississippi actually, so to add on to what you're saying, a lot of folks also don't know that Mississippi originally was just appealing its 15-week ban, right? Which already is a challenge to Roe, because 15-week bans are considered what people call pre-viability bans, and that's supposed to be like an undue restriction, right? Like a ban before a fetus is considered viable. And so this was challenging pre-viability bans, and so it's unclear how courts were supposed to rule in terms of cases that involve 6-week bans, like we have here in Georgia. So our ban is actually pending at the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, pending the outcome of the Dobbs case. And like you said, the language that is ultimately used in the final decision could shift, a lot of these cases one way or another. There are some of us who have pending litigation or injunctions that could automatically see very severe Texas-like restrictions in terms of the bans because they haven't passed the other restrictive stuff. But to Amanda's point, the legislative part of it is super important because we know that they don't stop. They get their way on one thing and they just keep digging. I was just thinking though, like we're here in Georgia, we have upcoming primaries. It's really interesting to see people talk about like how they're choosing to navigate the ballot. I'm just wondering, is there a way that we can, we're talking about, there's all this beautiful like stuff about, this multicultural coalition that is being built in Georgia and the new Georgia, whatever. But in some moments and instances, it really just feels like we are still, quote unquote, the old Georgia, and we're just trying to drag, the majority of the state along with us kicking and screaming. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts kind of going into this upcoming primary? I mean, early voting goes through tomorrow. Election day is next Tuesday. We have a Democratic nominee for governor who is running unopposed. And I don't know that folks understand the urgency of coming out and voting.
Yeah. So I will say from a recent report I read, Georgia is actually trending higher than 2018 midterms for voter turnout.
Okay.
So like, that's amazing. That's awesome. Things that we're seeing is vote by mail is extremely impacted by the new voter suppression laws. So that turnaround of folks getting their ballots and then turning them back in is so much lower than what you saw in 2020. Like, it's actually extremely disappointing. And that is because of the lack of drop-off ballot boxes. You only get one per 100,000, and they have to be inside a early voting site, and you can only drop off during those hours. Like, the point of drop-off boxes was to make it so you can drop off at any point in time to make it so everyone could vote, right? And so you're seeing a really low turnout for that. So we'll probably see a higher turnout. We are seeing a higher turnout for early in-person voting. It'll probably be pretty bad on election day when we get to Tuesday. I think the things that like I've been telling people is, they gave this crazy deadline, like May 13th, you can order your ballot. Don't do that. Like, it's like, that's too late. Like, if you're in like the second half of trying to order things, which now you can't, it's just way too late. You've got to do either in-person early voting or on day of. Also, both ballots for the Republicans and the Democrats are crazy long. And I like when I went, because I'm going to take my son to vote, I was like, let me just pull up this ballot real quick to see what I'm doing. It's almost like, it's like over 30 questions. And then like some of them are there's a long list of party questions. And then you have we have a lot of people who are very excited to run for office, but we have a lot of folks who are running for offices, and there's a lot of candidates to pick from. And both ballots are very long. I think the only one that's short is nonpartisan, right? And so I've been telling people like, you need to go look at your ballot before you go vote, because it's a mess. Like, you actually need to be educated on the questions they're about to ask you and on the candidates that you think you want to vote for. I know when they were talking about 2020, that was probably one of the biggest problems too, was the ballots were so long. This was the first time people were seeing the ballot, and it took a while to complete it, which also leads to long lines, right? And so I think that's the thing that's kind of frustrating me in this moment, is that we're not having a very open conversation about, like, what does it take to vote? What do you need to go vote? On top of, like, proper ID and to make sure your damn signature matches, you also need to know what's on the ballot. And I wish, like, someone or some org would, like, do that more. I know I did that recently for a couple of church groups, which is like, I just showed them what was on the ballot. And I was like, these are your questions. I'm not going to tell you how to vote yay or nay, but I need you to see it so you go in thinking and you can already know what you're going to vote for.
You're preaching a good word, because you made me remember that I need to go look at the ballot myself. I know my daughter's best friend, she sat down with me. She wanted to review, some of her choices and see if I had any additional insight. I said, oh, that person's running. I didn't realize they was running. No, that's interesting. I was like, let me go look at the ballot. I mean, because like you said, when you're covering this stuff, you think and then you actually pull your sample ballot and it's like, oh. And remember, folks, when you're voting and you're pulling your ballot, go all the way down. I understand, like, ballot fatigue, whatever, but it really is important to go all the way down the ballot. We tend to have drop off, when you get further down, because when you have a really long ballot, there's a lot of stuff on it. Folks can get tired and just be like, I'm not doing all that. Fill it all the way out, all the way down, because some of them smaller races that you're not thinking of really actually do matter. I know my example tends to be insurance commissioner, but labor commissioner, school board, what was it called here? State superintendent of schools. State superintendent.
Yeah. But even that's where your judges, that's where your judges, your DA, and your sheriffs are too at the end of the ballot.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Amanda, I appreciate you. Amanda Hollowell, you are absolutely fabulous. Where can people find you if they want to get some more of your good information and knowledge?
Just follow me on Twitter, because that's like the most politically correct version of me. So it's Amanda Hall, at Amanda Hall on Twitter. I mean, you can Google me. Like, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. They're all pretty much the same content. I think Instagram, I look cuter because I'm, you got to get cute on Instagram. But everything else is just, like, still the same thing. So, like, follow me, holler at me, find me. You've got questions. You guys need support in your communities. Like, these are the things that I want to help people with.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming and chatting with me today. Just about a few little things. And I look forward to chatting with you again on the record officially with your, super cool position in the future. But that was Amanda Hollowell, and it's Amanda Hall, Holl. And you can find her on Twitter. Yes. And Amanda is super sharp on a lot of stuff. Like, seriously.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Gives me way too much credit. Like, I don't know. I'd be a mess in the
group chat. You give me too much credit because I wanted it to be Friday. So obviously, I'm not too sure. This is mental fatigue. I was wishing for a Friday when I woke up this morning.
I mean, I'm happy it's Thursday because it's my off day. I work weekends. So, but I think we have on the clock coming up next, y'all. It's just Thursdays are an interesting day sometimes. It's not quite hump day. It's not quite Friday. It's a Thursday. But I do think that there's just a lot to be discussing. And I just wanted to spend a little time talking with Amanda just real quick about, a couple things that are coming up ahead of this Georgia. Last thing I have to say about the Georgia election, which is really interesting. I've been actually a lot quieter on Georgia since the past couple of years, not because I don't care. I absolutely care about the Peach State and all the people in it, but just, getting the opportunity to kind of cover other things, right? You can only do but so much when you're one person. Yeah. But I do find, like, some of the backsliding on rationale when you have white candidates running against black candidates in this race. We have the race for attorney general. We have like 5 or 6 Black. So this is bad because there are people on the ballot when I actually looked at the ballot that I didn't realize who were running for lieutenant governor. I said attorney general, I meant lieutenant governor. But lieutenant governor. So lieutenant governor is the number 2 who will follow Stacey. And there are those here who believe that Stacey needs a white man. Not that Stacey needs a white man, but the ticket needs to be diverse. And diversity would be having a white person and really a white man on the ticket. So there is one white man that was allegedly asked to join the race despite having, I don't know everybody. I can speak to 2 people's qualifications in that race. Both state representatives, Eric Allen and Bernita Shannon. I've watched and seen both. I know Bernita and I know of Eric. They're both, very qualified people. I think former city councilman Kwanzaa Hall, who was our 5th congressional district representative for 3 weeks in between when, Congresswoman Nikema won and when she was sworn in, because that's when they did that weird, extra election nonsense here in Georgia after John Lewis passed away. So, so there are folks that have differing levels of qualifications and stuff, right? But we've seen language on social media, and I know people think that they're just describing their candidate. But when you're in a race, it's a primary, and it's, he's a good Democrat, and he's the only white person, and you can't explain what makes him a good Democrat compared to everybody else. That's coded language, y'all. That's racist. I know you're not trying to be racist. I know y'all done read your Robin DiAngelo and did all that good white lady work after 2020 and George Floyd and stuff. And I know y'all know all about intersectionality. You watched all the good videos, listened to all the good podcasts. But in a race where, the white candidate, it's not like he's extraordinarily more experienced. I don't even know if he has legislative experience. I need to actually double check and look that up personally. But no one can point to anything specifically in terms of his experience that is better than at least Eric Allen and Bernita Shannon. Right? You may prefer him, which is fine. Having a preference is fine. If he helped you run your campaign, if he did something with you, if you have just gotten to know him better, that is fine. Just say that. But saying, he's a good candidate, he's this, it puts a value and it creates a situation as if the other people running are not that. And that's really problematic. And I'm about to be really loud the next several days about it, because they're if that's what you believe, that's fine. But you also gotta own the downside of it too, because thinking that the idea that white people will only vote for the ticket in November if there's a white person on it or white people, on the ballot is wild. Right. And we can get all upset about being mad about replacement theory and stuff like that. But Democrats seem like they got a little of that happening, as well as we see multiple races around the country, people getting very upset about getting beaten out, challenged, or just outright blown out of the water by Black and other candidates of color. I mean, as if being the moderate white person is the only qualification they need. It's a brand new day, baby. It's a brand new day. They don't fly no more. So that was my rant.
I know. I was sitting here and I was like, he's going for it.
I'm sorry, y'all. See, this is what the group chat be like. It's me ranting in text form. And Amanda
but I also think girl. You have No, I love it. I'm just do it. This is amazing. But I also think you've made several valid points. And I think the idea that we have to do respectability politics or play to this middle or worry about those folks, who we need in quotations their vote. Man, if we are trying to court people to vote for someone because they're white, we're playing into racism. I don't understand how people don't understand that, but okay then.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, it's absolutely the case. And let's just be clear. I mean, Stacey Evans, see, Freudian slip, because that's really the last time I had to go hard about this topic. But Stacey Abrams, I actually had to make speech at a Canvas kickoff in 2018 after Abrams was the nominee. I'm looking, this is the first time I'm seeing Stacey Evans in public after dogging her during the primary. I didn't dog her. I held her feet to the fire and I was demanding accountability, but I dogged her. So anyway, so the people doing the Canvas kickoff, so she's the highest, I guess, profile, member of the legislature, former elected official, whatever, present at this kickoff. But they asked me, and it's some brothers. And so they asked me to do the kickoff speech, right, for this big canvas. And I was like, are you sure? They're like, yeah. So I'm trying to be magnanimous. I tried to like acknowledge her presence there for the kickoff, and I called her Stacey Abrams to her face. It was the funniest thing ever. I said, oh, I'm sorry, my bad, Stacey Evans. You know, two Stacey's. Good Lord. But it's the same type of mentality that a certain type, because, you know, they used to, and there's still some people who do that now, like talking about Stacey Abrams, more so with her in terms of her hair, because it's her hair. Yeah. Like who can take her seriously with that hair? What? That's racist. That is racist. Ain't nothing about her hair except for your conditioning, your white supremacist condition that you don't realize that you have. And I'm gonna let you know that you got it. That would say that a Black woman with shortish natural hair, or a Black woman with locks, Black woman with braids, anything other than, you know, a press out, which there's nothing wrong with that either. It's all our hair, and whether it's a weave, whether it's art, whatever, it's all mine because I pay for it. But it does not make us less professional. It does not mean the words coming out of our mouth are less effective or powerful. What it does mean is that you're racist, and you need to actively work on deconditioning the white supremacist training that has been ingrained in you in your socialization. That's what it actually means. And people get upset when you say stuff like that to them because they're good. They're good people. You know, they supported BLM. I mean, I don't know. You should have been giving your dollars to some of these local orgs, but that's a whole nother conversation too. Like we have a bunch of amazing organizations here in Georgia, across the South, and across the country. You will find that you have people doing the work on a shoestring budget or coupon clipping the revolution, the movement, and they're not getting, you know, there are, you know, BLM releases financials, so it does document the different organizations that it gave grants to, and there are some really great organizations that do good work that are on that list. However, there are many more organizations that do good work, including some that identify as BLM chapters, that did not get any money. And that's just facts. And so, you know, you also, whether or not you donated money to BLM does not mean that you still don't have to decolonize the white supremacist racist tendencies that were built into your socialization. Just like those of us who, you know, were raised by cishet parents might have to do some work to not be transphobic and homophobic, right? I mean, like we all have things that we were socialized to do, particularly those of us growing up in the 70s and 80s. Now y'all know. We had uncles and aunties and grandparents and folks who was letting us ride around without seatbelts on. So y'all know, we got some stuff that we need to like undo. And so that's just a fact of life. And so to be resistant to that and to double down on thinking that you need a white moderate, or a white moderate is inherently more valuable and better than their Black, you know, the Black people they're running against. And I'm sure they're not even thinking that deep. And some of them, actually, I shouldn't give everybody that credit because I don't know all of them. A couple of the ones I know, I don't think they're thinking like that. I do think that they're making a decision for the right reason and not really thinking about the full depth of how problematic their position is. And I spent a lot of time just being quiet and letting folks like have their space. But I do find it highly disrespectful in this final push as we're trying to like advocate for our candidates. Advocate for your candidate. I mean, because it's very rare that I actually go or single out individual candidates, particularly since I've tried to stepping into journalism and learning more about doing political reporting. But I most definitely will light you on fire if I see something like going down that's not right. And Charlie Bailey, when he first announced, that's the white man running for lieutenant governor here in Georgia, he actually thought it was a good thing that he was recruited into this race. And I guess for him, it felt good to be recruited in the race, but he ran like a mediocre campaign for AG. That's what confused me, because he ran for AG in 2018. He was running for AG this cycle and then switched because it's like you was going to get your socks rocked by old girl Jordan, who's a state senator who's running for attorney general. So he was going to get your socks rocked. So they convinced you, allegedly, he was convinced by a party elite to switch over to the lieutenant governor race. That, like I said, has like like half a dozen Black folks running in it. And one of them is, like Eric. I know Eric has I think shared publicly. I hope this is something that was shared publicly and wasn't told to me in private. Since I don't know that, since I can't confirm or deny that I have this information that was from public or public source, I'm gonna be quiet. But I do know that folks, were positive and open to supporting Charlie as AG, and then seeing him switch over without like having conversations or anything. And that seems something like white candidates be doing a lot. Of stuff like that. Like they just, like, okay, you think you're cool, and all of a sudden I'm running against you and didn't even give you a heads up about it. Yeah, I don't know if that's public knowledge or not, but my bad. Sorry, Eric. But it's just messy. I mean, politics is messy, right? And we're talking about how much better. And so I really feel like in a lot of ways, people have learned little. And I think people really underestimate Georgia outside of, when you're looking at white Democrats, most of the Democratic strength outside of Atlanta Metro is in Black and the other small pockets of communities of color around the state. I'm not going to say that there aren't other, I mean, when you're talking about metro areas, Savannah to some extent, Augusta to some extent, and Macon. Not saying that white folks aren't voting them, but let's just be real about the numbers. The numbers have not budged. Actually, Stacey was able to make the numbers budge. Stacey made the numbers budge, right? And I'm cool with her lieutenant governor running mate Sarah Rizmico now, but I had to pull the carpet on Sarah on that too back in 2018. And we talk about it often. She's like, I can't believe I was so clueless. How this even got on my radar is just because Sarah and I have conversations about. She'll be like, is this how I sounded? Because she understood finally once, like, she and I finally had a conversation in 2020 about this. But like in 2018, they were like, well, Sarah's not a racist. I'm like, yeah, I know she's not a racist, but I'm gonna tell you why what she said was racist. That's the other thing, right? Like, it doesn't have to mean that your heart, that inside of you is racist. I know I probably would have gone way over time with the Rant and the Raven and the dude backstage are just letting me roll. We were supposed to be on the clock like 20 minutes ago, y'all. But I think with Georgia on the ground doing amazing work, Georgia Ford has been on the ground, in my understanding, in Minneapolis doing court coverage, I believe. Because stuff is moving again in the second stage of the trial of officers charged with being a part of the murder of George Floyd. And so I believe Georgia's been doing that coverage. And, Ben has stepped away this week just to kind of breathe a little bit more. And, I'm not going to run over because I believe Rebecca will be on at 9:00. So I will not run past then. But I mean, like, I just looked at the time. I was like, damn, and ain't nobody stopped me either. So I must be doing all right. But Amanda, just I've been babbling and rambling a lot about this, but I'm just thinking like, just thinking about like kind of your neck of the woods. Cause I'm sure even in some of the local races for like different things, down in Savannah area, you've seen some of this as well.
Yeah. I mean, our state. I
mean, you don't got to like name names and drop dimes on people like I do, because I don't have to be accountable to folks the same way. Oh, no. Same way you do.
Of course not. No, I mean, I'm going to explain it and then you'll hear it. So, I think like our state races, I feel like are on par with regular old regular politics and those candidates running and blah, blah, blah. I think the thing that that we're seeing that is overwhelming is our school board races, and it's very jarring for me. So it's like Chatham County, Glenn County, and then even like what they're trying to do in Brunswick, which is out there, which is the Ahmaud Arbery case. These are local elections that actually control and house people's like futures are being filled with extremist right-wing Republicans. And it's disheartening. I think the one in Savannah that's really blowing me is there is 2 Black candidates running for the school board, but they're supported by this alt-right rich white woman, and their names are Keith Padgett. and they are saying all the alt-right talking points, but they're Black. And I'm just sitting there, and every time I go to a debate or a candidate forum, I'm just like, how do we not see this? And then people are like, I don't understand why he's saying this. And I'm like, because he's being paid by an op. I was like, you're literally seeing what the playbook that they published, remember last year, about how they wanted to flip things. And so for me, that's what's alarming me. And I don't understand why party leadership hasn't really turned in and tuned in that on these school board elections, like a foul is a running, right? And nobody is like really like raising the hand. Like, I mean, they're openly talking about defunding public schools, diverting money to vouchers. They're all supporting the ban on CRT and the banning of books. And I was like, y'all, this is the beginning, right? And for me, I'm just like, I feel like when I do go on social or when I am, in private with folks, because I know who my candidate is Ty Whitley for school board president. I'm just like, I need you guys to understand what is happening in front of you, and I need you to move in a way that protects our children. Because if they can manage our children and govern our children in this way, they will eventually be able to move up in the ranks of politics. These folks who end up on school board can end up, God forbid, but in Georgia it can happen, being a judge or, your next city councilman, or then they go to state representative, and then you look up and they're your damn congressman or your governor, right? And so I just wish we would tune in more about what's happening in the education space in Georgia, because that's where the fight is happening, I feel like. And no one is really giving it the credence or the importance that needs to really be there.
Yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you saying that, because I want to say that something happened similar recently in Tarrant County, I think it is, where it's at Tarrant County is near like Dallas Fort Worth area in Texas, I believe, if I'm thinking correctly. But I know like people were pointing out like there was like a almost a clean sweep of school board races in some local races that just happened. And it was a lot of like right wing, just extreme talking points and stuff, because people haven't been paying as close attention. In other areas, people have been able to beat back some of those candidates. But I do think that you're right, that there are so many different things happening. Folks aren't necessarily paying attention. And that's exactly why it's like, this is strategic, right? Like there are multiple houses on fire.
Yep.
It's almost like a plantation. But there are multiple houses on fire happening right now. And folks are like, just doing their dirt on the other side, hoping that you're not going to pay attention to what they have to do. I mean, in many ways, that was really flippant. But I do think that, we see the attacks on democracy. So we see what's happening with voting rights. Florida is enacting, it's voting police. Georgia wants to do something similar. It's like a tidal wave effect that we see, right? We see them doing all the abortion bans. We see them all, talking about CRT, and they act like, no, this is just the right thing to do. Like, come on, dude, y'all are all operating from the same playbook. Heritage Action Fund and other folks, they've let us know, whether they meant to let us all know that that's what they were doing. But we know this. And yet, like you're saying, Amanda, people aren't taking action and necessary. And I don't mean people as in like everyday working, like organizing folk, like folks who are just going to work. Like my parents, I realized I need to like talk to my parents about what's going on too, because my parents were like, oh, so we have to vote in the primary? I thought Stacey was the nominee. And I was like, didn't realize I had to tell you all about why voting was important in the primary on my bingo card. And they're like, no, we vote. We consider. So like the same thing you're talking about looking at the ballot and stuff, checking in just with the people in our lives as just a first, kind of gut check thing, making sure folks have double checked their registration. I mean, these are very, very simple things. But I just remember the first time I voted here in the South with my dad in 2014, in Atlanta with my dad in 2014. The young man in front of me was voting for the first time with his mother. But because he had registered but never voted, he had been declared inactive. Right. And it was this whole thing going on at the polls. So that was like my first interaction with the voting issues here in Georgia. Also, my dad reminded me, had to remind me to go back in the house to get my ID. I did not have to vote with ID when I had voted previously in West Virginia. I mean, laws have changed since the last time I voted in West Virginia or Ohio. I do not recall having to show my ID necessarily in Ohio either before. Maybe I'm not remembering correctly, but I don't remember that, right? I firmly remember my first time having to have my identification with me when I went to the polls in Georgia. And you know how it be sometimes, like you might move and you don't get around to changing your ID. So I remember like very intently, I think, when the kids and I moved into our own place, because we lived with my parents when we first moved here, I remember like looking at the law very intently because I realized I had not changed my life. I mean, life just gets busy, right? I realized I was like, is this going to be a problem because my address on my ID does not match, and it's not. But things like that, though, can be used against folks, and we don't think about it, right? We take it for granted when we're in the know, but like, it's not that folks are ignorant. It's just not something that maybe might not be on their radar. And so having these conversations about even making sure people are going all the way down the ballot and like doing like all the things is really important, because these lower races that are on the ballot, they're not lower in terms of priority, but that's how they get treated. And that's such a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, just like how we format a damn ballot, like, good Lord, you know what I mean? Like, it's like pages. And so like here, now we're all on tablets. Now you got to scroll up all the way up to the screen. And I know like for people who are like very like technology, like adverse, like for them, it's like they don't want to touch the screen too much because they don't want to mess up. And that's real, because I have done that before where I touched the screen, and because the screens were sensitive or however they were calibrated, it changed my vote. And that was a big problem in 2020. And so I just think there's so many things stacked up against us when we go to vote. But I think the thing is to be important about the message we're saying. I think, like, this, we both live in Georgia. I think, what are we at, like 70 to 80% registered voters in this state? So registering voters is not our problem. It's getting you to the polls. And then making, yeah. And so like, it's getting you to the polls is the problem, right? What do you need? You need care, you need food, you need water, you need babysitter. Then on top of that, I got to educate you.
Which you can't give anybody that stuff at the polls anymore.
Right?
It's not for
you, right?
Sad.
You can't do.
Right,
Very sad.
right.
But you can still give rides, but you just can't do them in bus modes.
Yeah, you can still get rides, which is also important, because we've seen, we saw that Georgia, after Texas, was one of, had the highest proportion of poll closures and consolidations ahead of the 2020 election. And, some of this stuff is things that would have been corrected by the Voting Rights Act, the pre-clearance provisions that doesn't exist. And this is why people were pushing, not just for the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, but also the For the People, which then became, oh my God, it got changed, the freedom to vote. Yes. I was just like, oh my gosh, we've been through so many iterations. But like those things were still both combined important, because the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act only replaced and only fixed certain things for certain states. The Freedom to Vote Act, tried to help provide parity across the board. And Republicans keep talking about the overreach and things of that nature that was happening. Quite honestly, we were at the stage, and I'm not going to say this is like entirely new. And again, Democrats are not automatically always correct, but right now we are seeing a very, very sharp difference. And people can say what they want to say out their mouth, but their actions are speaking very loud. And even the doublespeak, which is dubious often on this issue, and so we gotta, even those of us that work in nonpartisan spaces, it's not partisan to call out inaccuracies when we're centering democracy. That's just what I think.
Correct. Correct. I also think the word overreach is hilarious because it's used when they need it to be used, right? So it's overreach on voter rights, but it's not overreach on reproductive rights. So what is it? When do we, what are we doing here?
Yes. So I have clearly just talked through a whole hour, so that was also, I guess, your on the clock segment for today. Shout out to Georgia Fort, Georgia does amazing work. And I'm just in awe of her tenacity, her grit, and just all the things that she has going on. Midwest is folks talk a lot about the South and we got going on here. The Midwest also has just a lot of its own stuff. And it's good that we have someone like Georgia and the team that she's building, being able to cover and really put a clear eye on things. And So Amanda, again, thank you so much for chopping up and spending a little extra time with me this morning. Tomorrow, I'll be joined by another friend who does work around at the progressive intersection of peace and national security. So that will actually be another really cool conversation for me to have. And I hope you find it enjoyable and engaging and informing as well. So I am turning this ship back over to its original crew, and I will see y'all again in the morning. Peace.
Thank you.